So I'm a board certified psychiatrist and have helped over 160 PMHNPs gain clinical confidence in psychiatric diagnosis, treatment, and being able to make better clinical decisions for their patients. So in this video, we're going to be covering amphetamine stimulants, how they're used, their mechanism of action, all the different kinds of amphetamine stimulants, the side effects associated with them, and the unique properties that these stimulants have over others. So let's get into it. So the first thing we need to understand about amphetamine stimulants is its mechanism of action, the MOA. So let's say we have the synapse here. And so in the synapse, basically you have a synapse and then you have the receiving neuron, and then that receiving neuron has its receptors. So dopamine and norepinephrine So dopamine and norepinephrine. So these get released from the synapse. So amphetamine stimulants actually have two mechanisms. So one is that it helps these two get released. Basically, it uses a thing called VMAT, and then that VMAT helps push them out of these vesicles outward. So then now it's in the synapse, and then in turn it can go there and then cause its downstream effects like increased stimulation, energy, its focus, etc., etc. So there's that. But when these synapses try to go back, so now let's say that basically this synapse or this neuron wants to reabsorb this stuff again. So when it tries to go back, it gets blocked. So what happens when this dopamine and the norepinephrine get blocked? Well, now they're just going to come out again and hit the receptors again. So that's essentially what happens. So if I mark this as 1 and then 2, it'll go here, 3, it'll go here, and then 4, it'll go here. So it's got two mechanisms. One is that it releases more dopamine and norepinephrine, and then 2, prevents its reuptake. So those are the key mechanisms by which stimulants work. Amphetamines do both the release and the prevention of reuptake, whereas the methylphenidates only do the prevention of the reuptake. So that's the main mechanism that stimulants work by. So the main thing that they are used for is ADHD. That's the main FDA approval for it. Of course, there's others like binge eating, fatigue, MDD augmentation, but this is by and far the most important use of it is the ADHD use. So now there's a couple, and narcolepsy too. So there's a couple different types of stimulants that we should be aware of in the amphetamine class. So I'm going to cover the most fundamentals. So we have name, we'll have their dose, and their unique properties. So let's start with Adderall. And so all of these stimulants are going to have their own individual videos as well. Adderall IR, we have Adderall XR, and then we also have Vyvanse. So Adderall IR, Adderall XR, and then Vyvanse. So Vyvanse is lisdexamphetamine. So Listdex. So Adderall XR is dextro. It's a mix of dextro and levoamphetamine. So the way that the dosing works is it goes from about 2.5 all the way to 40. So that's the main thing with the Adderall IR. XR goes from 5 all the way to 40. So there's a huge dosage range that you can strike between these two. So the IR 2.5 to 40, 5 to 40. You can go higher if you need to, but that's a nuance for specific patients. Some patients just have higher tolerance. For example, I've had a patient on 30 milligrams TID. You can go higher. So I'll say 40 and then 60 here, and then plus if you need to go higher. for Vyvanse usually will start at 10 milligrams and go all the way to 70, but you can go higher. For example, I have an autistic patient who's on 90 milligrams, 10 all the way to 70, then 90. Usually 30 is a good starting dose. Here, usually 5 to 10 is a good starting dose. And then for IR, usually 5 is a good starting dose. And again, the individual nuances of these will all be broken down. There's also other stimulants as well. So for example, there is dexedrine, there is Zeti, Vikio. So there's Vikio, Adzenys, and then Dynavel. And so all of these are broken down in depth, way more in our coaching program. That would be way too long to cover here. Each one has its own individual video. But the thing you got to understand about the half-life, short, medium, and long. So this is really important to understand this hierarchy, because these are what I consider the fundamental amphetamine stimulants. These are some of the extraneous ones that you can use in specific circumstances or specific patients, but by and far, this is going to be your bread and butter. So this one, half-life about 4 hours, this one about 8, and this one about 12. So actually not half-life, duration. Duration is a better way to think about it, because half-life, just because something has a shorter or longer half-life, it doesn't mean that its duration of effectiveness is going to be that same. So 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. So that way, let's say you have a patient who's like, hey, I need to focus during select periods. For example, I have an entrepreneur client who has trouble focusing in the afternoons. So IR was perfect for him. Then I've had a client who needed the 8-hour focus during the workday, but any longer than that was too much because they didn't want it to impede with their evenings. And then I have a lawyer client who is working long hours. And so for her, she needed that 12-hour duration because most of the time she was at work and working. So that's why you can depend it on the patient's needs. So that's the fundamentals of stimulants, of at least amphetamines. And then for side effects, the main ones, they all have pretty much the same side effects, but the duration depends on how long the half-life is. So irritability, insomnia, decreased appetite, increased heart rate / blood pressure. So these are the main ones, and the duration of action can affect it. So for example, let's say you have a long-lasting one like Vyvanse. So you're going to have the decreased appetite suppression for longer, and you're more likely to have insomnia because it's going to creep closer to bedtime than you would for the short-acting. But the short-acting is more likely to cause irritability because you have more of a spike in concentration and increased heart rate and blood pressure because you have more of a spike. Whereas this one is more of a gradual spread of the effect. So that's how these side effects can spread out or thin based on the half-life duration. So a common question I get in my NP coaching community is that people say, oh, this patient has a family history of a cardiac problem. Can you give them a stimulant? Or this patient has a possible arrhythmia. Can you give them a stimulant? And so generally, in most cases, you can, unless they have a certain severe cardiac problem, which probably would get a cardiologist involved. But you can check an EKG. The most important thing is the blood pressure and heart rate. And if they don't have an arrhythmia or any kind of severe structural abnormality, then you're pretty much good to go from the cardiac standpoint. But also decreased growth. So decreased growth velocity. So there's some thought that stimulants can reduce the growth of a kid. And so they have found that it can reduce the speed of growth, but the end height ends up being the same. So basically, if a kid is expected to be let's say 6 foot, instead of reaching that at maybe 15, they might reach it at 17, but the end result is the same. So it slows the growth velocity. So that's the prevailing thought in the field right now. So it's definitely important to understand that. so that way parents can make risk-benefit decisions. But it's also important for parents to understand that untreated ADHD can be a big problem as well. So tolerance is a big one as well too. So oftentimes rotating stimulants, so like taking breaks. So, you need to take breaks or rotate between amphetamine and methylphenidate can be helpful. So breaks or rotate, or taking weekend breaks, taking summer breaks, etc., etc. Stimulants can be used as needed, so that's the nice benefit of those. And they don't tend to have withdrawal per se, like they don't really have withdrawal, but patients can become dependent on them and feel very crappy coming off. So, but easy to just stop. So that's the thing to understand. Stimulants are kind of like glasses, like you put them on when you need to, and then you take them off when you don't need to. But patients, if they are used to glasses for so long, coming off the glasses can cause problems, but it's not a true withdrawal as it is for benzos or for or for SSRIs, for example. So overall, this is what you need to understand about the amphetamine class of stimulants. So I hope that this was helpful. If you are a PMHNP and you want to learn psychiatry more in depth, you want to learn from me, you want to get better at your clinical skills, your diagnosis skills, your treatment skills, get better results with patients, you want colleagues to respect you and patients to respect you more, you want to be able to get promotions and make more money by learning business and also being recognized for your skills, then definitely look at joining our coaching academy, Level Up Psych Academy, where we've had over 160 PMHNPs go through so far and really find benefit. So I hope that this is helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.